Welcome to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share. All ideas, thoughts, and statements are those of the guest and the host of Echo Oscar Delta, and not of Navy EOD or Navy as a whole.
What's up?
Howdy.
All right, so we got Harvey Fisher today. You've done, what, 6-7 months now?
Yep, about that.
Yeah, it's still pretty new. So we just wanted to get a new guy on, get their perspective of things. Now you've been around for a little while. You came in and what?
Went through EOD school in 2003 with, guys like Tommy and Shannon, Mark Mejia, Sammy Sosa was in my class.
Nice.
Who else? Oh man, Cameron.
Yeah.
Captain now. He was the class leader. Got a few big names. Todd Neal.
Nice.
Those guys on the West Coast. They don't know him. Yeah, so that was in 2003. Came in the Navy. Been in the Navy for about 22 years now.
Okay.
EOD for 20 of it.
Yeah.
So.
When you came in, were you planning on EOD? Is that?
No. Actually, it was funny listening to some of your other podcasts. It's funny how a lot of us are kind of that way. So back then, we all had our source ratings, but before that, I was in IT. Right, I was.
That's right. I remember that coming out occasionally. You yelling at me about IT things.
And really, the guys that brought me into the community was, legends like Jeff Reinhofer and Kevin Parra.
Yeah.
And so then when I was a mud pup, those guys ran the mud pup program, and then Josh Harsh is a diver. Yeah, I think he's retired now, but he also ran the mud pup program there at Mobian 2. There was a lot of guys, a lot of mud pups from Mobian 2 that know Josh Harsh.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You did most of your time on the East Coast, right?
Yeah. So I started my career after EOD school. I went to the West Coast. I was at Mobian 11 back when it was still up at Whidbey Island.
Okay.
Which was a great place.
Yeah.
Great place, and it's one of those things where it's like, man, I understand why we consolidated everything the way we did, but back when all the commands were spread across the world, it was awesome because we had places everywhere. But which makes me think now, it's like, man, because back then we had less guys than we have now. And
how'd we do it?
Yeah, like how did we man all those? And it just, and I'm sure we'll get into it throughout the time, just attributes how great some dudes are and like everything that they can get done.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
yeah. Back in 2003 when you came in, so you went through school in 2003. When did you show up to the mobile unit?
Beginning of 2004.
Okay.
So we were the first class to graduate in the beginning of 2004. And then you have to forgive me, scars on the brain, can't really remember exact dates, right?
No worries.
And, I'm sure some of the guys that were in my class could probably put in comments more specific dates. But came after EOD school, we were the first class that went back to Benning.
Oh, okay.
So the classes before us went to OTI, and they were able to get.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were able to get static line and free fall and everything else, and we're all expecting we're gonna get free fall right out of school and this and that. And we're all excited, and then they're like, "No, you're going to Benning," and just huge deflation out of that.
Yeah.
So, but showed up to the Mobian. I think it was probably about either spring or early summer, Mobian 11. Then deployed within 6 months of that.
Dang.
Iraq, and then it was nonstop after that for a good bit.
Yeah. I guess. So obviously there's some things we're not going to get into,
we can't
for reasons, but on the training side of things, coming in there, everything was pretty new, right?
Yeah.
Like people were just getting their feet wet with going to war. For you showing up when you did, and the training that you did, obviously in a very shortened timeline, that first round, how'd that feel as like a new guy trained up and then going?
It was fast, right? So there was a lot to learn, especially, and a lot of the guys that are out there and, new guys that are coming in, you'll understand this eventually. But the things you learn at school in the pipeline, a lot of it doesn't necessarily go into what we as a, Navy EOD community, what we do as far as the everything that it is that we have to know is, from warfare, right? The combat mindset, and then all the little intricacies of everything that we do, from, all the Suburni piece, right? Chem, bio, nuke, then, conventional ordinances, and then impedances to assault, and then like attaching to, other combat units, whether it's conventional or whether it's soft.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to learn. And back then it was just everything, right? We eventually got to a point where we kind of started stripping some things down for certain teams, which that's gone away since then too. But which I'm kind of good because more well-rounded EOD operators better.
Buzzword. I never thought I'd see the day.
Got well-roundedness. But it was quick, and I mean it's way different than what we do now. We were still out of those old SSVs, the Chevys, no top on the back, no camper, anything like that. And then everything, a lot of things were dismounted. I remember my first run through 2-1 at in training. We did a dismounted nuke drill.
Yeah.
So it's me, guys like myself, Justin Jewett, JJ, Noah Esparza, Chris Tiao, Tony Tubolino, and my first chief and big mentor of mine, Bob Zimmerman.
Yeah.
And we're doing this dismounted nuke drill, and we're carrying a pig dismounted. I'm like, and I was a A-dubber, right, in the in our patrol, and it was just like, man, this sucks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like this is a lot of crap to carry. It was ridiculous, because then, because you're helping carry the, rotating through, carrying the pig. You're carrying all the. I was carrying all the ammo for the. For the 60, because that was our cruiser at that time, was the M60 for us, and then just the ammo for that. Plus to make it even worse, because I was a prior IT. Guess who's the freaking radio guy?
Dude, radios are extremely light.
Yeah, everybody knows it's like a feather in your ruck.
It's terrible, dude.
So yeah, it was interesting, but it was definitely one of those things where I think helped define me throughout my career. Was just that it was go nonstop, and that was something that that Bob Zimmerman kind of really pushed on us, and the guys that were in training at the time, because they understood, like, okay, hey, even though it was a couple years in to the GWAT, we still weren't fully fledged into it, because I think a lot, there was still a lot of like, okay, play with whether or not how much we're going to do in the water and how much we're going to do on land and all that other stuff, so there was a lot of that play. I mean, even though we had guys that went in pretty quickly in Afghanistan back then, guys that were coming off ships and all that stuff. So it was still drinking out of the fire hose.
When you first came in, so you talked about, Navy EOD specifically, trying to find exactly where they fit and like try to get in, but also try to not overstep what Navy's supposed to do. Back then, how much were you privy to that, or were you just like focused on training?
I was focused. I was 100% focused on training. Like we were, the amount of, because I was a second class. So I was IT2.
Yeah.
IT2 Harvey Fisher, trying to still figure out. Go ahead. I guess I'll go ahead and cuss. Trying to figure out my asshole from my ear hole. trying to work that piece out was a big piece for me as well. Just trying to figure out everything that we did, and learning all those things throughout the years with that. Because the first, when I was at Mobian 11, my first 3.5, almost 4 years there, I was only stateside 200, I think it was 250 something days, 260 something days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were everybody was gone all the time. There were guys that were there, you know. I'm sure there's been plenty of stories about it where guys come back off a rotation being at the Mobian for about 3 years, and then some guys there less time is like, are you a new guy?
Yeah.
It's like, no, buddy. I've been here for a while. So, but yeah, it was a busy time back then for sure.
Yeah. Jumping forward like a lot. So coming in, training the way you did, and then now, you know, for quite a while, ever since I've known you, even when you've been doing operational stuff yourself, like your big thing has been training guys. How has, you know, your time up to now affected how you look at and set up training for new guys and experience? But
yeah, so it's always been, for me, I try to make it as hard as possible and as realistic as possible, just because, and to have as many facets of just problem solving that needs to happen, right? So, and, you know, that's always been training, especially I'd say probably the last 13 years have been a big piece for me, just because, you know, from the first time I was a platoon LCPL, you know, freaking 13, 14 years ago, that was something that everybody always told me, like, hey, gotta train you guys, and that was, so it's always been a thing where it's like, okay, I want the best rounded dude I can have, and I want to make sure that he can grind it out, essentially, right? Just as hard as I can make it for him without it breaking them as far as physically, mentally. I wanted to see if I could break them.
yeah,
Right, without actually causing injury, I'd try to make it as hard as I could, just because I think there's a lot to be said about that, and I think that a lot of the guys want that. You know, guys want that challenge. Guys want to be able to show that they can get through that, and that's what they came in for. That's what they're in this program for.
yeah, I'd agree. Even though sometimes when they're going through it, it's nonstop complaining about how hard it is and why is Harvey making me do this.
There has been a few things said about that, like, well, that's unnecessary. Like, no, it's not.
But did you die?
So it's always, you know, there is a balance. You know, luckily enough, I have a lot of these times, especially when I get really, really like, okay, no, we're doing this. I have guys that are solid sounding boards that are kind of remind me, like, hey, Harvey, we don't have to be this way. The guys can't take a break. And it's true, you know, I mean, even myself, like, I gotta, you know, find myself in that, like, okay, hey, it's all right. It's okay to take a break every now and again.
Yeah.
You know, just, you know, but to me, it's like, okay, hey, let's show that you can get through this first, and then we can start pulling back the throttle a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I've always found that the way I've once I've had some influence on the training side, is hit the ground running as hard as you can. Because if you realize you're getting to where you want to be quicker than expected, then you can throttle back. But if you start easy and then you realize you're not going to make it, you're going to make everybody go until it's time to go. And that's not fun for anybody either.
No, and then you want to have set up an environment for that guy to really have tested that prior to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you really, really test it and make it harder on, like, certain physical aspects in the beginning as you build up the intellectual aspect, and then make the intellectual aspect harder, then they can start melding those two together. Because that's the big thing I always tell guys, like, hey, dude, you're always going to be the most tired guy on target.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're the one leading the way. You're clearing the path, and then dismount the whole time. And then once you're done with that, like, you're going in, right? You're going in, and then a complex problem arises, you know, whether it's an impedance or something along that nature. And now you have to make these complex intellectual decisions on whether or not, okay, I can do this, I can't do that. I need to recommend these things to a ground force commander and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about doing a lot of that, like recommended a ground force commander and just some of those things that, like you had mentioned in EOD school, were tested on the specific thing, right? The going down and looking at a bomb, figuring out what fuse, figuring out how to disarm that fuse, disarming it, and then blowing it up, right? Mm-hmm. Very separate from, like, even just a normal MOB team going into country mm-hmm. in a war zone or a conflict where we're actually doing operations, and there's a lot more involved. How was that aspect? Like, learning that aspect of it. And I know that now, training-wise, that's a big aspect for you, where adding in the actual operational piece, so all that combat portion of it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? That's adding all those other pieces into it can be pretty hard, especially when you have guys who don't have that experience yet, right? So they can't role play that either, right? So the best way to do it is just get as many people as you can involved in the training, which sometimes is pretty difficult to do. So, like, there's a lot of times where one person, and a lot of guys listening to this probably know this, where one person is acting like four people. Mm-hmm. You know, so it can be pretty hard when you're trying to add in all those other aspects of that. But the thing that we have to focus on those baseline skills, and then not only the baseline skills when it comes to, like, just the explosives piece, but, like, overall warfare. So that's, to me, I try to let guys know and understand, like, hey, man, there is so much to what we do that you have to understand that you have to be able to flow through all these things, because, you know, kind of funny I'm going to say this, but, like, the irregularity of the warfare that we do is insane.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of guys, even guys within our own community, don't fully grasp the whole scope of it, especially newer guys. You know, guys that have been around a bit and guys that have seen it, done it, or heard stories of it, or, like, or have read some of these things about all the different aspects that we have been involved in pretty much since our inception. You know, yes, everything that we came from, everything that we've evolved from, everything that we evolved to, and then everything that we've, you know, done in between. The scope of responsibilities and the magnitude of the just the operations that guys have been on is mind blowing.
Yeah. I think even, like, if you think about the MCM world, I think most people that are involved in that kind of thing look at just the one little aspect. So if, like, we're diving on a mine, they look at just the diving portion on the mine. Well, the thing about Navy EOD, which has crossed all of our mission sets, is, yeah, we do that with, you know, inside of a larger operation, but also we have missions that are outside of a normal operation. And I think that goes to what you're saying, that, like, Navy EOD specifically is expanded beyond just the normal mission set, the normal standard, mm-hmm. you know, any operation, any portion of our job, there's the standard set, whatever, and then there's the irregular part of it.
Yeah, and it's and it's just gone so beyond a lot of things, especially in, you know, during the GWAT, and I consider myself to be pretty fortunate for the timing I've had with the GWAT and everything else, but just, you know, looking in the future and kind of taking lessons learned from the past prior, the GWAT I think is important, right? Mm-hmm. Because, you know, there's more, right? There's things beyond just the you know, war on terror, especially now. It's pretty much, you know, we're kind of over that, you know, and just looking at the next threats that we're going to be facing and things of that nature. You know, it's really important that we take some of the older lessons learned and we evolve from where we are now.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, we where we were during the GWOT, we evolved so fast and so rapidly from pre-GWOT era to the GWOT, and then even after that, I think there's a lot more evolving that we can do, and hopefully, we'll see it where the community goes.
Yeah. I didn't prep you with this before, so if you want to think about it, you can. But, we're moving into a spot where there's more and more guys who haven't gone and seen combat. And they're going to be or are responsible for training guys who have not seen combat. How do you view that in terms of, right, that's a fact that happens and it cycles, and it's not one of those goods or bads because it's just a fact, right? But have you thought about, or do you need to think about before you answer, how or like methods to improve their ability to train guys who are in a similar state with them, not necessarily experience wise, because experience, like in doing the job is one thing, but then there's the experience that you get from combat and taking the job to combat. Because one nice thing about our job, or if you want to look at it that, is there's work in EOD no matter what's going on in the world. But in a conflict or in a war, it ratchets it up.
Yeah, so something I've thought about before, actually. There's a few different ways to approach it. Again, World by Harvey. All right, so this is by no means anything official or anything like that, but the in my eyes, the way we can approach these problem sets are purely intellectually, right? That's something I tell a lot of guys is, in Navy Special Operations, right, and what we do is it's all here. Right, that's our greatest asset is that, right, is our mind and being able to think through things. So it's just because a guy hasn't been to combat doesn't mean he can't train guys for combat. So there's a lot of things that can go into it with just how he thinks and the processes that go behind it, and realizing that, hey, not everything is going to be the same. Not there's a specific way that will always handle a particular problem set. Right, so there's to pretty much teaching guys how to be able to flow through problem sets instead of just like, oh, it's this because of this, right? Oh, I come into this room, and because I see X, Y, Z, my answer has to be A, B, C. No, it's not that at all, right? And I always tell guys, the way the wind blows can change, just how the direction of wind can change how somebody can approach a problem. And and so pretty much just fostering that idea of like, okay, hey, there isn't just one set of answers that has to go with all these problem sets. It's the answer that you make. It's the answer that you make through your intellect and through your training and through your understanding of threat assessment, and then being able to work to your ability. A good friend of mine said this years ago. It was like, hey, don't ever work past your ability. So, and having guys with that understanding of like, okay, hey, I know my ability is only going to take me this far, right? So this problem set that is a little bit outside of it, I need to throttle myself back and either get help with this problem, right? Or I need to approach it a different way than somebody who possibly could do this, who has a little bit greater ability in this arena than me.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of the way I see it. It's not that, again, you're right, it's a natural fact that there's going to be guys training guys for combat who never went to combat themselves. So those guys, one, right, it's an ego thing. Right? Guys got to put away their ego and say, okay, hey, you know what, yeah, I didn't do this, but here are the things I know. Yeah. And here's a thought process to go with these things, and that's, to me, is the biggest thing, is just a thought process. And then treating training like it's real.
Yes.
Like a lot of guys are so quick to admin, so quick to, Like, oh, we don't need to throw on, you know, we don't actually need to throw on gas masks. We don't actually need to throw on this much weight. Like, oh, yes, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you do, my friend, because when time gets real and you realize, oh man, I am 15 pounds heavier with this gear, and now you just realize, oh my gosh, that's 15 pounds more per step for this 16 click dismount I have to do. You start rethinking things like, okay, what is my true abilities? So I always say, hey, make admin is the least amount of things that you can do, and then the next thing is, you know, trying to induce that sensory overload, because that's the thing in combat, and that you know, you learn, and it's hard to really truly understand till there's once things start going, it's such a sensory overload, and if you haven't been desensitized to that sensory overload of like, okay, this is going on here, this is going on here, I have to make this I have to make this decision on this while everything around me is chaos. And then being able to focus on, you know, the 5 meter target, the 10 meter target, and working your way through these problems. You know, I mean, if you don't do that, like the first time you experience it, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I heard, you know, on training guys is, you know, sometimes I think we can get a little too into this is when we talk about safety and like the safest way to do things. We can get too into like, this is there is a safest way to do a problem, but then you have to take into the human account, right? And the safest way, because abilities are different and we have to take that into account, the safest way for me to take care of a problem and not get injured or die may be different than for you to take care of the problem and not get injured or die. Then there's the safest way to make, like, there's the way to make sure that it doesn't blow up, right? But if your ability isn't at that level, well, then you have to ratchet it down and be like, all right, I'm going to take some concessions.
Right.
Might blow up, but at least if it does, I'm going to be safe. And yeah, I think, and that all comes with, you know, like you said, training to the abilities, and then just increasing those. Yep,
and that's right. That's what training is for, right? Is to try to push those abilities.
Yep.
And the thing with that too is that, oh man, I had something for that. So, with training, when you have to be able to push those abilities and you work towards your abilities, and there's certain things, and it's a fine balance. That's what I was going to talk about. There's a fine balance to be played with that, right? Because there's a point like, okay, hey, and you know, guys have heard it, trying to be super safe, uber safe, and everything else. Well, you may be putting yourself at risk. You may be putting yourself at risk for other threats.
Yeah.
Without even knowing it, because you're so focused on decreasing the possibility of that threat that you've increased possibilities of other threats.
Yeah.
You know, so like it's always a fine balancing act, just like everything else that we do, you know, between even just, you know, people knowing who we are and what we do. Very few people know everything we do.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a good thing because it lets us kind of retain that, like, being silent professional and all that, you know, all those buzzwords, if you will, right? But the bad part about that, right, is that guys don't know, and they just kind of like, oh, it's that.
Yeah.
But you don't realize the stuff we get into, and like you said, there's so many things that we do that's, you know, even outside of combat and outside of these other warfares that, again, makes everything that we do irregular, right? So, like, talking about, you know, doing security details for, you know, high value personnel all the way, you know, 1 month, and then turning around and going to, you know, high intellectual arenas with labs and things of that nature, and then turning around and doing CQC, and not just with Navy guys, but with Army guys. And even though they're both soft units, one unit does something slightly different than the other, so you have to be able to adapt to all the little nuances between each unit, right? Because that's the thing with us specifically is that we're not the typically we don't sit on the outside of the cordon waiting for an event to happen.
Right.
Right. We're right in there. Typically you can't differentiate what each person does in that stack. Right. And that's just something people don't know and realize. And it's something we don't typically advertise either.
Yeah.
You know, it's because of who we are. And luckily, hopefully this isn't advertising too much.
No, I think, even if we were to explain this to a T, like it still wouldn't make sense to most, like, except for those units that we work with, they might actually understand a little better what we do. But people still aren't gonna really get it. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because we have to understand so much of all the other pieces and parts of the mission and of the job, whether it's, in a MOB team where we're working out of a vehicle and we're in a convoy of, regular Army or, special forces, special operations, convoy, dismounted, whether we're, out to sea working with big Navy, which is probably the scariest thing of all. It's just, I think it gets different, but I think one of the things that we're really good at is quickly going from one to another. So quickly going from, going out and working with the SEALs to coming back, being on an MCM team, and now going out and working with big Navy. It like I joke about it being scary, but it really kind of is because you're so used to like the way one thing's work, and it's totally the opposite.
180.
Like, the structure and how much input the junior man has on a target with the SEALs. Like if you're the EOD guy and there's an EOD threat, nobody's asking your rank.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case when you're working with big Navy and there's a lot of multi-billion-dollar ships around and you're giving a recommendation. They're not going to go to the junior man in that scenario.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we're not going to go to the junior man on if we got a question about, hey, when you were down there and you saw X, Y, and Z, can you do what needs to be done safely?
Right. Yeah, that's, again, it just shows the uniqueness of who we are.
Yeah.
I can't, we could talk about it for weeks. You really can't explain the uniqueness of all those little intricacies, everything. And it's everything, right? From, free fall to diving to, the other mobility pieces when it comes to helicopter operations, even just, convoy operations, dismounted, all these different, and those are all just outside pieces to what is the core of other things that we do. But yet they take such a big part. And then there's other pieces that we've gotten into as far as over the last 20 years, on how we're able to target certain things, you know what I mean? And so there's so much into all those different things that just go beyond, the like what you said, the typical conventional way of, what EOD services are looked at. And it's like, there's a reason for all these extra things for us.
Yeah. Going from, put it this way, having fun for a lot of your career to being in charge of people having fun. How was that?
It was hard, and and what's crazy is just the difference. I'll admit it, the difference in caliber and personnel now, right? Even though we have less, there's obviously less work and there's less, less quote unquote fun than what we had early in my career. The caliber of guys, this person knows who he is, but one couple of the guys on troop or company, however you want to call it, for my my last deployment, those guys, there was a Princeton grad. There was a guy who, half of the guys, I think actually everybody but one dude had a diploma.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they take care of themselves way better than what, our generation ever did. You know what I mean? As far as, PT wise goes, and after PT, and like understanding the recovery of physical activities and understanding the diet piece and all this other things. So they're better caliber when it comes to that. They're better, they're smarter at certain things. You know what I mean? So it's interesting, but it's same point. It's like, man, I wish I was what I'd give to be there again. But then you realize like, okay, hey, pretty much my time in that role is over, which is a heartbreaking thing to get over. And it was something that I really had to come to terms with after my platoon LCPO ride at 2.
Yeah.
I got back from that, that combat deployment and sitting back going, oh man, that was it. And you're like, man, does it have to be it?
Yeah.
Then you get the little reminders, like, okay, hey, you've done enough, or like, oh, like my body. That bad boy would remind me that, hey, you're not in your 20s or 30s anymore, bud.
I was gonna say I saw you in strike yesterday, and I mean, I knew you were done.
Oh yeah, it's painful, man. It's painful, when you sit back and you're like, man, why doesn't this limb bend anymore?
Right.
And you think in your head like, I still do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can 100% run out, go out on an op right now, 100%.
I know 100% that you would if somebody asked you, or if you thought that by the time you got on that op, nobody would notice.
That's probably pretty true. No, don't tell Susanna that. Susanna will.
No, yeah.
She'll.
I was totally joking.
She knows.
Yeah. That was
she knows, but she's threatened me enough to. I know better at this point, and she, but you gotta give it to that woman, all the things that she stuck through with me, and all the chaos I've taken her through in our marriage. She kind of has earned the right to look at me and say no.
Yeah.
Excuse me, what was that? You want to go where? Nope. What are you trying to do? No. Like, but bit? Nope. All right. You're right.
And I feel like she knows when you are, I don't want to say not being truthful, but when you are hiding things.
She knows
not only that you're hiding things, but like she knows you enough that she knows what you're hiding without you.
Right.
So
she's smart.
That keeps you honest too.
Yeah, she's smart. She'll point things out real quick. Like, well, hold up, what?
Yeah.
She goes in. It was funny. We were just talking about this the other day. She goes into these little. She called it her interrogation mode. Then she goes, or curiosity mode. She's trying to hide the fact that she knows it's an interrogation. And she'll start asking these pointed questions, and you're like, and even sometimes when you're not even trying to, like, and it'll be something silly, like certain hotel things, like, because we did a little family vacation, took the girls up to DC, and she did this. We were talking about one of the hotels we were staying in, and I was like, oh, well, XYZ. I go, we're gonna stay here, and blah, blah. She's like, well, why? I'm like, I don't know, because this. She's like, no, that don't make sense. I'm like, well, I don't know why it doesn't make sense. Right? But it's true, because it's like, I sit back and I'm like, man, I guess the way I said that probably does make it seem like I'm hiding something. And it's like, but I wasn't trying to hide anything, so. But it's
funny.
She's definitely been a huge part of like just my evolution.
Yeah.
Both for me as a person and throughout my career. She's actually one of the reasons why I'm still in Right, because at 20 years, I was like, oh, I'm going to be done, right?
Yeah.
You know, I want to, retire and everything else. And I remember, and I don't know how much of this I could say, but I remember complaining about some things. And Susanna was like, well, why don't you change it? I can't in this position. And she's like, well, why don't you, excuse my French, why don't you get off your ass and do something to where you can make that change? I'm like, don't you tell me. Fine. We're going to go take a company.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. I've been able to enact the changes, certain changes, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But I do realize that okay, hey, don't whine about things if you're not willing to put in the work to try to change what you can.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. That's something that I go back and forth on. I think most of us do. Like especially if there's too many of us in a room, we're all gonna feed off each other and talk about how horrible our life is. And
that's true.
But then, when we get alone, or when we get with that one person that's like, all right, dude, we had our fun now.
Yeah.
Now it's time to be serious. Like, what are you actually doing to make a difference? That's one thing there's a few people that have done that for me in my career at different times. Mm-hmm. Basically asking, well, one is like, what kind of changes you want to make? Because that depends on, whether you come in enlisted, come in officer, if you're enlisted and then you go officer, whether you want to take certain positions as enlisted or officer. Like you can't make certain changes in certain roles, like you're not going to make a policy change. You can influence policy change on the enlisted side, but just the way the Navy works, Master Chiefs aren't writing policy. They're influencing the officers who write policy, but like on the enlisted side, we can definitely make changes on personnel. And then if we get into those right roles where we're trusted, that's when we can make the really good pushes for policy type stuff. But
and that's something I realized too, is a lot of guys will get confused, once they make it to a certain position, they think that they're like, oh, this is mine, and I know this is like, no, you don't. No, you don't. The Navy owns that, and an officer owns it.
Yep.
I mean, like, you have to realize your position, right? As a chief, senior chief, even master chiefs, right? Your position isn't. You don't own that. You don't make the decision on that, right? You give advice. You try to give sound advice. You try to make mindset changes. And you try to give recommendations for somebody who has the authority to make that decision.
Yeah.
Right now, there's some times in certain aspects, in certain positions and during certain operations and things like that, like where the call has to be made by, call is made by a chief or some type of supervisor or team lead.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, guys have to understand, like, no matter how much they may whine about officers, and I'm guilty of it too, and talk about how they don't like certain aspects of whatever officer community you want to throw out there. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they are paid for that position.
Right.
And not only are they paid for that position, they have the authority within those positions that go beyond yours as an enlisted man, whether it's chief, senior chief, master chief, it doesn't matter.
I think it's important for people to understand that too, because once you understand that, then you can understand like why it's important to, no matter what your feelings are on a specific person or group, right, to figure out how to work with them so that if you think something needs to change,
right,
that you can actually influence, and they don't just look at you and be like, okay, this dude's talking again.
Okay, buddy. Yeah. Pat you on the back. Let me let you sit down.
Exactly.
And that's it. And you're right. You have to be able to understand that. And the sooner you understand that, and the sooner you understand that, hey, you know what I need to do is I have to get through
Yeah.
to this guy. You know, it's not something you're not going to force it, right? So you kind of have to have that ability to like be able to articulate what it is you want in a fashion that is most appealing to that person.
Yep.
I mean, and you know, when you make it sound that way, it's almost as if like you're trying to manipulate, but you're not. It's purely because there's these little things, these little nuances with people that will prevent them from, you know, accepting something that is being said, and instead of just, oh well, this is because, you know, because I said so.
Yeah.
I have so much more experience, and like, yeah, you have. That's why you're the advisor, right? Use that experience, but just because you have experience does that mean you hold the authority?
Right.
Right. That's what I think is lost on a lot of guys is that, hey man, it's not your job.
They don't keep the humility.
Right.
In it.
There's a lot of ego that goes into that, and everybody's guilty of it. I've been guilty of it, especially my first platoon chief ride. For those of you who are on my first platoon chief ride, I'm sorry.
But hold on. I'm going to mark the time. I don't think I've ever heard Harvey say sorry.
I was mean. There was still a lot of learning that occurred for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was younger. I thought that was how I needed to be, was mean, you know, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there's still plenty of guys who think I'm mean, but it's not that I'm trying to be.
Yeah.
It's just an
That's who you
expectation.
are.
I'm trying not to be. My wife is way better than me. She keeps me from being too mean.
Yeah, see, she's not mean, but I know I don't want to go against her. I'd rather go against you.
Yeah, there's been a few people.
I won't win either, just to clarify. But
yeah, there's been a few people that have said that to me. Like, hey, man, I'd rather you be mad at me than Susanna. Like Josh said that to me. He was talking. We were talking about, you know, some opportunities for me possibly at the end of the year, and he was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let you do anything until I hear that Susanna's okay with this. I'm like, well, hold on now. So, but yeah, it's a lot of people are, you know, who know my wife are like, oh yeah, I'd rather. And it's funny because it's not like she talks me, and it's not like she's not like me where I'm like, well, I'm blunt and will get into people. And she's so nice, and she's just amazing, you know. So.
in your career, aside from, you know, going downrange, because I know if I don't put a caveat on it and I ask you this, that's going to be your thing, right? But what's been the best part of EOD?
Oh man, it's not even the going down range part, right? It's just being on a platoon.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's the guys, you know, and everybody talks about that, right? And it's, you know, the fraternity, the whole piece, right? But it really is. It's the guys, and it's knowing. The cool thing is it's knowing that dudes will have your back, and not just your back in a way of like, okay, they'll always stick up for you or they'll always fight for you. It's the guys that like are there to make you better. They'll pull you aside in a room. You know, and there's been a couple guys, and they know who they are if they hear this, who pulled me in a room like, hey man, yo, what you're doing is not correct, right? And that's just that constant development of that, and it's not that. And a lot of guys, you know, a lot of it is guys will, even though if they just let you be, it can progress them in one way or another, right? Because it's like, oh well, Harvey can't do this, but I can, right? And they don't do that, right? It's like they are truly there to try to help each other, and that's one of the best things. That and just, you know, training and watching guys progress, and like how they start to understand things, and how they start, you know, how their mindset starts to develop, and how they start seeing like, oh, I understand this beast now better. And then watching that is actually pretty cool. You know, I mean, there's always jokes, and there's always, you know, degrading each other, you know, purely out of you know, love and expectation,
of course,
if you will, you know.
Of course.
So like if you're not being, and everybody knows this, if you're not being picked on a little bit in our community, you're probably not liked.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like, if guys aren't calling you something, you're probably not liked.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Same thing with me. Like, usually the guys I like, I'm picking on them pretty bit.
Yeah.
And there's other times, like I try to remind them how amazing they are just because of like their abilities within our community. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a piece too that I guess as I've developed the last few years is like, okay, hey, I don't always have to put people down. A good friend of mine, he kind of pulled me off. It was actually on this last deployment, and he knows who he is. He pulled me aside, like, hey man, I get it that, like, like you've been in the community a little bit longer than me, but dude, like, you don't need to talk to me like that anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, bro, I'm sorry, man. I wasn't trying to talk to you. I wasn't trying to talk down to you, brother. I talked to you that way because I love you, and realize like, I guess, yeah, the way I say certain things to you, I can see how, like, yeah, maybe it's, can be viewed beyond just playful banter.
Yeah.
Right? So I try to remind people too that, hey man, like, you just being here is amazing. Right? One of the things is that guys don't realize how small of a community we are.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are positions, I don't know if I can get into numbers or not, but guys have heard me talk numbers, and there's positions in our community where it's you're literally 0.00001% of the world that can do what you do. Right? And that is, when you're talking about taking a platoon, no matter what platoon it is, doing jump operations, and then, going from jump operations to security detail stuff for important people to chem bio and nuke agents, right? And the high intellectual piece of that, and then turning around and doing knuckle dragging combat stuff, then turning around and then doing dive and all the things that go into that.
Yeah.
And then there's always this thing of like, oh, jack of all trades, master of none. Well, that's true, but not true, right? I mean, the whole saying is actually pretty good, right? Jack of all trades, master of none is still better than, a master of one.
Yep.
Right? There's we're not just jacks of all trades. Like, a lot of guys are masters of multiple trades. Mm-hmm. Now, when you talk about guys like, he's retired now, like Jeff O'Connor, or like Matt Strawn, even, he's still active, but Tommy Matney, these guys are geniuses and just masters of like certain, of the chem bio world, and then they turn around and they outshoot 99% of the people
Yeah.
And they're able to physically perform. I mean, look at freaking Jeff O'Connor. I think he's like 152, right? And he's in better shape than like most 20 and 30-year-olds.
That's so true.
And he did it in just the way he works in his mind, and just getting into all the different things that he's done. And again, he's not a jack of any trade.
Yeah. Like,
every trade that man has picked up, he's a master at.
He is.
Right?
Agreed.
And like, that's just one of those guys that you just want to aspire to be.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing that like those are guys that are in our community.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see like Jeff and a bunch of other guys that they did so well in the community. And it wasn't, we were talking a little while ago, like, a lot of times we say like EOD builds a foundation, but really like there's a foundation built for most people before they came to EOD that set them up to become EOD operators.
Yeah.
And then the EOD portion helps build the rest of the rooms in that house.
Yeah.
And then when this phase is over and move on to other things, now you've got this amazing structure built on a solid foundation that you had before you even got here. And maybe you strengthen that in different areas in the time where now they're just crushing it in whether it's finance or their own business or just, making EOD products now for the community. I mean, there's...
Well, that portion, he's had that for a while.
Right. Yeah, he had that. Well, I didn't realize it, but I just saw a thing specifically for Jeff that, he started that like after his first deployment.
Yeah. But, I mean, he's had that since I've known him.
Yeah.
He and I met at DLI back in, I think at the end of 2007.
Is that where you learned English?
Yep, it is. This ESL accelerated.
Oh my goodness, that got me. That tickled me.
But yeah, he was. I first met him, and he was again just one of those solid dudes. And you're like, man, and he and I would just BS about things all the time. And
Yeah.
I was like, man, you're gonna go places in life, dude. Like, man, I wish I was you. Like, I've got nowhere else to go.
This is it.
This is it for me. Like, that's probably why I haven't retired yet too. Is just because I don't know what to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that say that, but it's true. It's you sit back and you think about it, and it's like, man, we were just talking about. I've done. I've got to speak at a few of my friends' retirements now, and it's like, man, you're so brave. You're so brave going out into the new wilderness,
Right.
And you just like, man, what am I gonna do? And then you just have, and on top of that, you have guys who, you got guys like Jeff O'Connor, but then you got, another one, is Tyrone Logan. That dude, he's got, he did. I think I want, and Tyrone, if you hear this, you have to correct me, but I think he did 10 or 11 years, right? I mean, the man he was a Sailor of the Year for the Navy, right? And then he got out, didn't retire, got out. I think there was just a lot of things that he had going on, and he just wanted to make sure he took care of himself, and he had plans. He got out and he wound up working for a bunch of different three-letter agencies, and now he has his own business that's multi-million-dollars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, it's not, I know Ty, it's not about the money, but like his success is just awesome. It just shows how awesome of a dude he is. And that's a lot of other guys, you got plenty of guys out there that, that do so much, not only for the community, but just everything in general. The guys who own their own companies, Mark Sanders, Bob Brush, Leon Lowell, you got Bob Pizzini. Mm-hmm. And these aren't just like little coffee shop places.
Right.
These are guys that are, controlling multiple employees, multiple locations, it's just like how they have the capacity for it. And then talking to them, like they all attribute to like the things, maybe not necessarily the things that they did while they were in the community, but the things that they learned and how they learn to learn.
Yeah.
Right? Has been a big piece for them. Just like our approach on problem sets.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, like our approach on problem sets, if you really break down the EOD mission, really it is like, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't even have to be something with explosives or, chemical, biological, nuclear hazards. I think I've heard of multiple times where EOD operators have made the difference by taking a problem that was set before them that had nothing to do with what our job is or what we trained for, aside from the fact that everything that we do is to look at a problem from as many aspects as possible, as many angles as possible, attack it from each one of those angles, figure out which one makes the most sense. Then as soon as we do that, figure out all the problems with that, and then attack each one of those problems, figure out if thens. So if this happens, then I will do this. And like, just keep doing that down as far as you can for as much time as you can, and then go after it. And like, that's when I look at, a lot of the business stuff that people do, afterwards. And, I think that's a big reason why they're successful is that, the foundation before is what made people that are drawn to EOD
successful in EOD.
Exactly. And then EOD, like we said, helped build that building on the foundation to then go on and attack all the other problems that, and by problems, I don't mean like bad things, but all the obstacles that are in their way. If we want to get a block down the road, there's stuff that we have to do. And just the way we work for the majority is figuring out how to get there in the best means possible. And then before all the bad stuff arises, figure out what that could be so that if it does arise, we've already got something in the works.
Yeah, and you're right. Like you hit it, hit it right on the button with that one, man. It's the ability to have that approach on things is definitely what helps guys become so successful, not only in EOD but beyond, right? And like you said, the foundation that was laid prior to going through the pipeline, getting into the community, and then the sound structure that is built on top of that foundation from everything you learn, in the community, and then taking all that to the outside world. It is why a lot of these guys are so successful. And the thing is they're so successful even without people truly knowing what it is that they did.
Yeah.
Accomplish in EOD.
Yep.
Right. And while they were in our small little corner of the world of, not very many people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, I hope, a secondary or tertiary or whatever 4 steps off is, that this podcast kind of does is like brings awareness to an extent about what we do, so that when you go for a job and you say, I talked to my second OIC not too long ago. It'd been a long time since I talked to him, and he was talking about how when he got out, he initially was like, I don't even want to tell anybody, what I did, right? But of course, people want to know your background, and eventually, I was a Navy officer. Like, okay, what does that mean? How's that help you in what you're trying to do, which is join my company? He's like, well, I was a Navy EOD officer. Okay, what does that mean? No idea, And then he starts explaining. They're like, oh, Navy SEAL. He's like, no, not Navy SEAL, But try to like bring some awareness to all the different aspects of our job that we do, so that, within reason, when you go to a job and you say, hey, I'm Navy EOD, they're like, oh, okay, I have an idea. Because, SEAL goes to a job and say, oh, I was a Navy SEAL. Okay, I have an idea. They're probably still going to be like, well, how does that help you here? Like, what in your job? Like,
well, not even, man. There's a lot of, and, I have plenty of SEAL friends, and, and it's nothing against them, because, our SEAL brethren they do a lot of amazing things, but, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, like, they're like, oh, here, give me the opportunity, like Lockheed Martin. And it's, you're like, wow. Oh, that's a lot. And then you turn around, you're looking like, wait a second, how come all the EOD guys is just, UXOs? And you're like, we did a lot more than that, right?
Yep.
And you're right, it's one of those things where in your podcast is, awesome. I think think the last one was episode 13. I want to say.
Yep.
It's great to show that. I hope more people are able to get in on it, because it is, and it's a thing where everybody's kind of like shy at first, like where I said, like why are we talking about ourselves? Because we hate it.
Yeah,
we hate it.
It's weird.
We're the worst about it. The absolute worst. Guys won't even. They'll talk about other dudes.
Yeah.
Like the guys will have no problems talking about how great other guys are.
That's how I should have started this. I should have had it where I bring a guy on to talk about somebody else. We could have gotten all kinds of stories.
Man, 100%. And like, and the thing is, it's always like, man, how can you, like, how amazing you are, dude.
Right.
Like you're, I'm hearing, who was it, man? Smooth brain. There was a few guys that like were talking. They were talking up some of these other guys, and talking about how great they are, and like, oh, well, I was just kind of this, and like, no, dude. Like I've heard your name.
Yep.
You and I may not know each other, but I've heard your name.
Yeah.
And you are a freaking legend, dude. That's always something that like, it always blows my mind. It always humbles me by looking around like at the people I get to call friends who are just flipping amazing.
Yeah.
They're giants. I get to call people like, again, Jeff O'Connor, Matt Strawn, Tommy Madden, guys like Billy Sangster and Pat Flanagan, and just, Pat McLean, the mentor of all mentors, man. Like that guy, if you ever want to know how to be a good man, you just look at Pat McLean.
Yeah.
Just guys like that, and you're like, man, like I get to know these dudes, and it's such a humbling thing, and it always makes you kind of get into that. I can't remember if he's talked about that in one of your podcasts or not, but it was kind of makes you get into this, like, that poser syndrome, or what's it called? Imposter
syndrome. Yep.
Right? Like it does. And you're like, man, I'm not. How can I be in the same room debating a situation with these men? Right? Like he's done this. Heck, before he even came in our community, he was a cop.
Yeah.
Right? And he was, like, did awesome work as a cop. We're like, oh man, how? Like he did. Like he was doing things, he was doing things before things were cool back in Bosnia.
Yeah.
Or like, and you're like, man, here I am. Okay, I got a few good deployments. I haven't lived a life like that, man.
Yeah.
And then you're like, man, and then you hear guys talk. That's for me, when my imposter syndrome kicks in, right, is when guys are able to rattle off all these how to solve all these problem sets.
Yeah.
Like, man, you did that quick.
Yeah.
Like, man, I gotta sit back and like drool on myself a little bit while I try to figure this problem set out,
Yep.
Like, and you look at it like, man, so that's another piece, I guess, to kind of go back to one of your questions is, that's probably one of the pieces I love the most is that little piece, knowing that I get to be in rooms with the guys that have done the most amazing things in the world, and not just in the military, but outside the military, pre-military and post-military. What I mean? Like some of the things, like Todd Neal. There's a few stories about him on some of the amazing things he did before he ever came into EOD school. You know what I mean? And then like just guys like that, and you're like, man, how lucky.
Yeah.
How lucky am I to be able to call these men friends?
Yeah.
And it's so it's one of those things where you're like, for those guys out there that struggle with it, and I'm one of those with you, the imposter syndrome is real, but take solace in the fact that you get to call those men your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself should help you with that,
It's funny. So I'll say two things. One of them, as I've been doing this, one of the things that helped me kind of like get over some of that is that almost every single person that I've sat down with has some type of insecurity that I'm like, dude, that's your strength, you know? And like in my mind, I'm like, that's one of the things that everybody's impressed about you for, you know, like whether it's, you know, a certain number of deployments, a certain type of deployments, you know, the things they did, like the thing that I think makes us so good is that like we are going to be one of our hardest critics, you know, but that doesn't hold us down because some people it does, right? You just get on yourself about how you didn't do as good as you wanted. The things you did weren't at the level, and like, well, there's just no point. But most of us are like, man, you know, the way I attacked that problem, I failed. Even though I didn't fail, like still passed, but I just felt like I failed. Instead of shutting down, go back and like, all right, well now I just gotta train harder. You know, I gotta look at more options next time. I gotta look at all this stuff. Yeah, personally, and I still get like this sometimes, but for most of my career, even when I first made senior chief, it's funny because I would go into offices, right? I'd go in, since we've been talking about Jeff a lot, I'll say Jeff again. I go into Jeff's office, right? I met him when I was in E6. I was senior chief, he's master chief, and I go in and talk to him, and I kid you not, like so many times I would pull back, like in my head, I'm now in E6 talking to a master chief. Like he made the next rank, but I like go back to when I first met him. You know, it's like when you see your family that you haven't seen in a while, and like what was a 10-year-old niece is now a 20-year-old niece, but you're like, no, you're still 10. Like you look different, but you're still 10. And that just happened to me with so many people where I'd like walk into an office and I'm like, I'm E5 drawn again. Like, this is really awkward. Like, why is this guy even talking to me? Like, he's actually talking to me like a person. Like, I don't get it, you know, but I'm better with it now, but it takes like,
it takes a while.
It does. It does.
I mean, even like every now and then we'll go up to, go up to some of the training lanes and Mikey Cobble will be there. And I'm like, oh my God, Master Chief Mikey Cobble.
Yeah.
Do you know what that man's done? Like, that dude jumped into Iraq. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like nobody knows that. Right? There wasn't any news stories about this guy jumping into Iraq.
Yeah.
You know? It's always somebody else that did it. You know, and you look at him and you're like, man. And he's still, you know, one of those guys that are like, yeah, you can go to combat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could look at him and go like, yeah, I bet you put a gun in that man's hand and put him out in the middle of nowhere, he'd be okay.
Yeah. He'd be all right.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm the same way. It's like, you know, you feel so insignificant, especially when these, and that's the thing, right? You hear all these stories of guys, right? And none of which are out in the public.
Yeah.
Right? You know, like, it's not, you know, some of them classified, some of them not, or whatever, you know, but you hear these stories and you're like, how in the world?
Yeah.
You know? And it's, you know, it's one of the things that, like, I admire about us, but it's, again, that everything about us is a double-edged sword, right? Something I admire about us, but something else is like, man, we need to do better at recognizing this, you know, like, you got guys, man, when you read their Bronze Star or Silver Star write-ups, you're like, holy, what? You did what? Like, you fought off 20-something dudes and covered, you know, and I don't know these guys. I just know the story, but, you know, those two West Coast cats.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know them, but, you know, I read their write-up, and I'm like,
It's impressive.
And you're like, man, like, this is, you probably could have gotten higher. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but like,
But you just did.
yeah, but it's true, man. You read the write-up and you're like, man, or you read, some of the old school guys. I don't know, when you read up some of these guys' Silver Star write-ups, you're like, right, and then just listening to the stories of guys, like, man, you did a lot of stuff. And like, they gave you a calm.
Right. Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. Oh,
like, hold up a
dude.
second. You literally fought off this amount of fighters, and then you legitimately saved 3 dudes in a room.
Yeah.
And you took care of 11 IEDs and
Man with a V.
yeah. Well, I have one of those.
No, I know. Like,
So, and you're like, you sit back and you're like, man. But it goes back to one, like, there's a lot of guys who, there might be some closed door complaining about it, right? But a lot of guys, they just don't care. Right?
That's the thing. So, just a couple days ago, I was fleet temp stalking some people. Right, I had some extra time in the morning. I woke up really early, and I was like, I was looking. It started with looking for something that I needed to find out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then of course it just goes into, well, like, I wonder what this guy did. I wonder what, like, not did, but wonder what his info was.
Yeah.
I wonder when he came in. I wonder when he made Master Tech or whatever, And then, there's that awards button, and you go over to it, and like, there's dudes that never once talked about the things that they did, but I'm looking at it, I'm like, Bronze Star, Bronze Star, Bronze Star, like, that's literally like deployment after deployment after deployment, like consistently doing things. And you talk to them, and most of the people in our community are not resting on that. Like, they're not saying, oh, hey, last deployment I did this, and so you owe me. Like, I'm going to take a break. No, they're like, okay, in the moment, like, awesome. Thank you for this. And so what's for training tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and that's something that is true, and it's a constant. Guys in the community, and Susanna points it out. Because Susanna does a lot with. She's probably done more for the community than I ever will. You know what I mean? She's solid.
Yeah.
And everything that she does through the foundation, which I'll go ahead and put a plug in for. The Navy Special Operations Foundation. So, those of you who haven't bought your gala tickets, go ahead and buy your gala tickets. Those of you who haven't donated to help fund the memorial outside of Group 2, go ahead and do that now.
That's right. Actually, on that, I just saw, I think Trevor Maxwell started it. He did donate $24 for the 24 guys to the NSOF Foundation, and then challenge somebody else. So, like, obviously you can donate more, 24,000 if you would like. NSOF will not turn that away.
For those of you rich guys.
Yeah. But I thought that was pretty cool.
It is, because it's, like, it's one of the foundation. It's the only foundation that really supports the NSO community, right? Or it's the only foundation that exclusively supports the NSO community, which is Navy divers and Navy EOD guys. And it's the amount of work that they've put in and the amount of stuff that they do. Between, and it's all between helping guys just get through some things, you know what I mean, and helping families of those who have fallen, and just beyond combat losses too, and then like trying to foster that culture of like, hey, we can get together without loss, right? Because that was the biggest thing throughout the GWAT, right? So it seemed like the only time we were getting together with our brothers was when we lost a dude.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, like, you'd sit there and, like, oh, okay, hey, last time I saw you was at so and so's funeral, you know,
Yeah.
and it's it's crushing. And then when NSOF stood up and then they did that first gala, that was one thing everybody was ranting and raving about. Was like, holy crap, it's awesome that we're here without it being a funeral, without it being
Yeah.
a memorial. Now, obviously, we always talk about the dudes that we lost because I mean it's it hits your heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then, well, like just the amount, so there's that piece with the gala, right? And then the other things that they do for individuals, like they're I know there's the amount of people that they help for things as silly as like, hey, you know what, my wife is moving out for XYZ reasons, and not even like being divorced, just moving out. Can you guys help? Or, hey, so my sister's in the hospital. We're supporting this way, but we need food. Can we get, so there's a supply of Uber Eats, and they do it with such little funds that they have.
Yeah.
But they're able to manage it so well. It's ridiculous, Like things like the Coops reset, the operators reset, where guys are going to, here on the East Coast, it's Wintergreen, West Coast, it's Big Bear, I think, and just having a bunch of dudes together to kind of get those stories out and kind of help each other heal, right? Because when you're dealing with the things that we deal with and some of the injuries that we deal with, both physical and mental, right, and then some of the demons that we've picked up along the way, what I found for me and what I think what's kept me sane is to be able to talk to my, being able to just get it out there on the air, you know what I mean, and not just bottle it up, because I found myself bottling it up after I think it was my third deployment, and I was not a good person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like being able to just talk to the dudes and the operator reset or the Coops reset that NSOF puts on is absolutely amazing, because there's no strings attached. Right? There's no strings attached. There's no expectation of like, okay, well, hey guys, tonight we're gonna sit around the fire and sing Kumbaya.
Right.
No. It's just like, hey, all you dudes know each other. Get together. Some of you may not know each other, because more likely, how it is. We're all 1 degree away from knowing everybody in the community, because there's enlisted wise, there's less than 1,000 of us.
Yeah.
And so like being able to do that and like get with guys and tell the stories and everything else without there actually being strings attached, it just makes it more organic, which makes it better when you're discussing it. That's what's helped me. Oop.
Clank.
That's what's helped me over the years, dealing with all my things, So
Yeah.
anyways, where was I getting at? Why did I bring up my wife?
You were just talking about Navy Special Operations Foundation and stuff they did. I can't remember where we started. My brain don't work so well either.
That's that. It's almost like shaking baby syndrome.
Right? Yeah. I will say too, though, on getting people together, right? If you're new to the community, I know that it is probably intimidating to go out to some of these events, because you're like, oh, it's going to be, dudes that have done it forever and, this and that, whatever. But come out. Like, this is one of those times where, except for there are some people that may be weird, but the most of us will keep them in check. Yeah. Where, like, you come out to these things, you can be a new guy, first platoon, like, just showed up. Dude, we want you to come out and see and talk and
hear these stories.
Yeah, because then it's like you talked about desensitizing. It is a version of desensitizing you to like what's out there. Plus, it's also like there's a lot of people that have learned a lot of lessons the hard way, whether it's family or work side, right?
Oh yeah.
And you go to these, and people are willing to talk about that, and it can help save you from going down a wrong path with your family, and like just to be aware of like some of the things, because a lot of times especially once like, especially if things start to get crazy again and we start deploying all the time, and you get back from a workup, or, you know, you do a workup, you deploy, you come back, you get in on a workup that's already been, you know, 12 months going on. So you come in on the tail end and then deploy again. And then that cycle just keeps happening for 5 and 6 years at a time, you know, which was very realistic.
Very much so.
You're not focused on like seeing some of those signs, but if you come out and talk and listen and share your experiences, you know, maybe it'll help you out. And like, but then also just sometimes we want to hear the stupid stuff you did, you know, like you said, like most of the guys coming in had, you know, either time before they came in, whether they were enlisted or officer, and then college stories. Like, some of us didn't get all those college stories.
No.
Like, I wouldn't mind hearing some of those instead of this the stupid stuff I did while I was in, you know?
Well, that was like that. It was the trip you and I were on together. Last, I think it was last fall, maybe the last winter time.
Oh,
frame.
yeah,
It was,
yeah.
Arrived and we were all hanging out and we kind of let those new guys just kind of rip and tell
Yep.
some stories. That was great.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you're right. It's one of those like, man, I didn't get to do any of that crap when I was a kid. You know.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's funny. You're right. Like that. For those new guys out there listening, man, you know, Sharon's right. You know, if you ever hear about us getting together, don't be afraid to either come or, especially if it's an open invitation.
Yeah.
There might be like you said, there might be a couple of times where guys are, you know, there's a meaning behind the meeting, so like those guys probably shouldn't have come. But anything that's an open invitation, come on, listen.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's such a good time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just hearing goes back to what I was saying. Just listen to some of these amazing things men have done.
Yeah.
Like, ah, man. So, but it will humble you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and
Absolutely.
put that out there. It'll humble you because you'll remember, like, man, these guys, you know, I can't hold a candle to these guys.
Yeah.
You know.
But then that's the thing is like, yeah, maybe you can't right now, but you got 20 plus years to start figuring out how to build that wick.
Yep. It's true. That is true. But man, I really wish I could remember why I was bringing it up. That's scars on the brain, my friend.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, what were we talking about? Were we talking about training?
Probably. Oh man, that was so long ago.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the amount of things that guys do and like you know, like being able to, I think what we were talking about was maybe identity stuff, right? Because you get that all the time. Guys just automatically think, well, once they start hearing stories, and if they don't know what it is that you do, they automatically start thinking you're somebody else, you know. And it's just kind of like, no, man. And it goes back to the like, all right, hey, you know, it's good that people don't know, but at the same point, like, it's a necessity, especially if we want to keep our community healthy for the future.
Yeah.
So, but it's you know, I mean, there's so much that can go into that, you know, and it's one of those world by Harvey type of things, you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely my opinion, and there's admittedly so I'm sure there's plenty of things I don't know about that go into certain decisions, you know what I mean? And I know that, so I kind of just sit back and, you know, say what I can when I can.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like as far as I can't remember what the hell I was going to say.
You keep trying.
I'm trying. We were talking about loss there for a second too, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's because that was, you know, a big piece, right? Was you know, guys weren't dealing with it either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we were, because of how busy we were, you know, and just going from one thing to another to where we weren't really able to mourn those guys, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's one of the big things why at the end there, in 2016, why when Scotty passed, that was a big hit to a lot of us. You know what I mean? Because we had gone a little bit without anybody passing.
Yeah.
And then not only had we gone a little bit without anybody passing, but we were kind of in a lull as far as work goes. So we had more time to process it and to mourn it, and then it just turned, there were some silly things, with like, I don't know if this will get me in trouble or not, but like with Scotty's Irish wake, then Chico's debacle, then his memorial the following weekend, and the AJ Gators debacle, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things where like when we were able to actually process it, it hit everybody in the community hard. Scotty was one of those legends, Scotty and I mud putt together back in late 2001, early 2002. And he was a legend. There's anybody that knew him that he didn't touch in one way or another, and in a good way, and everybody saw him as a legend. So when we lost Scotty, it was pretty hard.
Yeah, he was a solid operator, but just a solid human being. Like, even, yeah.
And he's one of those too, where prior to, he was, he was on the USS Cole. I don't think he was on board at the time, but he did, the amount of stuff he did prior to as well was just pretty impressive. So
yeah.
So, what else you got for
me? Man. We've been going for about an hour and a half. You got anything else that you want to share for this first round?
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is for guys who are new to the community or kind of struggling still with your identity, and for guys who are trying to figure out which community they want to go in and maybe don't know too much about us, is the cool thing about the community is the breadth of knowledge and scope of responsibility we truly have that very little people know. Yeah. I think that's something that guys need to realize and focus on for sure.
I would agree. It's a huge thing, and if you don't make it that, like, the knowledge of that a priority, then a lot of other things are going to be missed.
Yeah.
Thanks for
having me on, dude.
Yeah, man.
I know we've been talking about it for a bit, and it's one of those things where it's like,
I know.
Should I go on?
Just had to find the right way to do it. I think we did.
Yeah, left a lot out.
Yeah.
Maybe down the road we'll get into that again.
It's like a teaser for what's to come.
Yeah.
But, no, man, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Thank you for listening to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share.